representative who will join us on that week will join us here to unpack the last week's events and the coming week's diary to help us connect the dots in terms of how one event is linked to the other and eventually how all these events speak to the overall objectives of government. These conversations will be in studio, on the telephone, Skype based, and hopefully we'll be able to conduct them every Monday, but we'd like to say today we're joined live in studio by Ms. Diko. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much for having us, Desiree.
We're saying that the purpose of having these conversations is letting the South African public in on what the president does, but perhaps in trying to just clarify that purpose. Let's look at the work of the president. Give us a sense of his work schedule. Firstly, how he divides it between government, a party and government, and then when you move to government, how he divides it between national prerogative, regional, continental, and then international.
Well, thank you so much. And I think, Desiree, we must extend our deep gratitude to you and the SABC for having created this slot. I think it's very important because it allows the conversation to happen and for people to really understand. I mean, you see the president flying all over the world, you see him involved in domestic duties, but as you're saying, how does it at the end of the day come down to how it's going to change the lives of the people? And that's what the office is about. Now, coming to your question, as you know, the president is deployed by the governing party, in this case, the African National Congress. So as he goes to the union buildings, he carries the mandate that comes from that governing party. The last elections, the 2014 elections, would have given him an overarching theme, which was about together we move South Africa forward. And obviously the manifesto of the governing party is then what they implement or what we implement on a regular basis. That manifesto would have identified like 5 key areas, speaking to issues of land, of jobs and the economy, fighting crime and corruption, and obviously the international work about building a better Africa and a better world, and most importantly, education and health at the apex of the work of government. So those are the priorities that he carries during his term of office. On an annual basis then, he breaks them down into annual programs of action through the State of the Nation address. The last one was in February of last year.
His first one,
yes. So we're going to another one this February, I think on the 7th of February it is. And that work, it focuses, and I think it gives a very clear sense of where the priorities are. And this administration, its main priority is about economic growth and economic recovery. It's about ensuring that our people have jobs. And if you look at the president's diary, you'll see that about 80 to 90% of that is focused on really, this path of renewal that he talks about, this path of growth, ensuring that the economy is able to absorb as many people as possible. Then he has other domestic priorities, which would include, as I said, education and health, fight against crime, and which obviously, as much as they don't dominate his time as much, and largely because you have ministers who drive those programs, but in terms of the president's then availability to do that, he has been at the forefront of leading the economic recovery charge. Then we do a lot of international work, and this is done because South Africa's national interest is obviously at the top of mind when we go internationally. Again, those trips are about attracting investment to South Africa, ensuring that we learn from best practice, and so no 2 days in the office are ever the same, but they are guided by the manifesto of the governing party.
You were talking about his first State of the Nation address, and we're looking forward to another one in the coming months. He announced at the first one that he was going to galvanize investors to bring them in, and we've seen the multiple events that took place in 2018 in this regard. Has there been any impetus?
Indeed, you'll remember that he announced the target of raising $100 billion over the next 5 years. And that's not investment just for the sake of investment. It's investment that must go into our economy, our drive for industrialization, our drive to boost the manufacturing sector, most importantly translating into jobs for the South African people. So since he announced that $1 billion or 1.2 trillion South African rands, in excess of 690 690 billion rands has been raised. So this is through the work that he would have undertaken in the United Arab Emirates, the commitments that were made by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and a number of other countries, including the United Kingdom and so forth. But he also had hosted the South Africa Investment Conference, which again put 290 billion rand into the kitty of that 690. And these were global corporations that were coming in and saying, we want to make new investments in the country. And I think that was important because he was saying, let's not just take her away. Let's ensure that there's new investment that comes. And this investment firstly must be driven by trade, a lot of the work that Minister Rob Davis does, but must go into productive sectors. So issues of energy were prioritized. I know that the Saudi Arabians, for example, want to build a refinery here. Agricultural production. The president is a huge believer that our next goal is coming from us ensuring food security and things like that. And the fourth industrial revolution is very close to his heart. So a lot of the money is looking at such sectors. Then he is setting up a team that's now going to coordinate, ensuring that those are project ready. We begin to see delivery against those commitments that have been made.
We are starting today on a very busy news day. There's inquiries all over the place that the president has started. But there are other commissions. The commission into state capture is also underway at the moment. What are the president's thoughts on developments in these processes as they unfold?
Desiree, the reason why, and I think I was saying to you off air that there are many commissions of inquiry, but it's important. They're important because they show it's tangible action. When we speak about economic recovery and we speak about creating jobs, a lot of it has to do with ensuring that people feel safe to do business in South Africa. Investors are confident, firstly, that we've implemented reforms that are going to ensure policy certainty, which is one of the issues that they raised, but most importantly, good governance. Yeah. So whether it was the SARS Commission that was implemented, whether it's the PIC Commission, whether it is the Zondo Commission really into state capture, it's about rooting out in the public service those issues that would have hindered growth, but ensuring that the state is able to conduct its business in an environment that is free from all these undue influences. So the president's view as it relates to the commissions that they must be allowed to do their work. I know that you have a number of political parties that tend to be overzealous and want action now, but it's important that the work is undertaken meticulously.
In fact, talking about the action now, what has been the response to a reported letter from the Democratic Alliance regarding the revelations about Bosasa?
Well, I'm not sure which letter they refer to. I think we had gotten a letter in November that would have been sent by the leader of the opposition, again speaking about African global operations. But Desiree, it's going exactly to the issue that I'm talking about. This commission on state capture was established to ensure that we get to the bottom of all allegations. Now, we can't be, having running commentary on it. Each time a revelation comes up, the DA expects everything to stop and we set up another commission of inquiry. Let's allow the Zondo Commission to conclude its business. It will come up with recommendations, and if necessary, it will also come up with pointers whether there needs to be any criminal prosecutions that need to be taken forward. And I think you'll remember that when we had when the terms of reference were finalized for the Zondo Commission, a lot of that came to say how much of the information that comes out can be used going forward after the commission. So we would really urge political parties not to use this process for cheap political point scoring, but to allow it the necessary space to complete its business, and at the end of it we'll get the recommendations. I mean, you've already seen some proactive measures that are taken by some of the people who are implicated. For example, Minister Nene, who chose to resign based on the revelations that have come out from the commission. But the president is clear. Let's allow the commission to complete its work, and then we'll act on the recommendations that come from that.
The president has already congratulated Felix Tshisekedi on his victory in the DRC. Is he satisfied of the completeness and the credibility of the election process in the DRC?
There's been a lot of consultations between South Africa and the Democratic Republic of Congo, within SADC, and most recently even within the African Union itself. President Ramaphosa issued a congratulatory note to President-elect Felix Tshisekedi, as you're saying, and he has said that that process has been relatively peaceful, has been relatively stable. You would have the Constitutional Court, which is the highest arbiter in that land, coming in and giving a verdict and looking at the issues that would have been raised by candidate Martin Fayulu on the objections that he has made. So the president respects the sovereignty of the DRC, he respects the territorial integrity of the DRC, and he respects that their internal processes, which have now been exhausted, would have been thorough in the process. He's urging the people of the DRC, firstly, to continue in the spirit that they would have demonstrated, during the process of elections and beyond, while they were waiting for the outcome of the Constitutional Court. And he's urging them to accept those results, and saying that peace and stability within that country is critical, not only for the DRC, but the region and the continent as a whole. So as South Africa, we stand ready to assist in any way we possibly can on issues of stability, on issues of development, which is very necessary in the Congo.
So your office released a statement saying that tomorrow the president will be one of the main speakers at the Future of Work event, where a report will be released there, this leading up to processes in the Davos meeting in Switzerland. What can we expect to come out of South Africa's involvement there, but also in Zimbabwe? The president of Zimbabwe has had to return home and not attend that gathering because of the events taking place in Zimbabwe since he announced a fuel price hike. How's the president approaching the Zimbabwean situation?
Yeah, maybe let me start with Zimbabwe. The president is in constant dialogue with President Mnangagwa, as are our diplomats through the various diplomatic channels that exist. The president has said that, and I think it's a principle. We need to understand the principle that this government operates, which is one of respecting the sovereignty of countries. Now, in our region, you have a SADC that is very, very active in the work in the region, and we would ensure that as and when the president of Zimbabwe were to call on South Africa, we would always respond to that. The Minister of Finance is on record having said that they're looking at short-term credit facilities for Zimbabwe, and we would assist. So we are comfortable as it relates to the engagement that our diplomats are having, that the situation in Zimbabwe is one that is being monitored closely, and South Africa would always assist when it comes to any call that would be made by any of our friends in the region. Now, on the ILO, it's the Future of Work report. It's really looking at how you ensure that you sustain and protect workers in a fast-changing global environment. It feeds nicely into WEF, which is going to be looking at, again, how do you shape a global architecture in the face of the fourth industrial revolution, in the face of this trade protectionism that we are seeing rising, and obviously all the other challenges that are presented by globalization. So President is co-chair of that ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work, and it's something that's very close to his heart. Being with
his history as a unionist.
Exactly, with his history as a unionist, but also a businessman, where he's able to look at it from both sides, and he's able to give input onto that.
Talk about vantage point.
Oh, yes. So we're really looking forward to that report, and we're going into WEF, and the message that South Africa is carrying is, firstly, one, we are a nation that is on a path of renewal and growth, and we are a country that means business. And I think all the steps that President Ramaphosa and his administration would have taken over the last year directly point to that, and you can see it's starting to begin to bear fruit.
When you have a conversation such as this one, you want to talk about everything, but obviously time doesn't permit. But we woke to the very shocking and very sad news over the weekend of the passing of Ambassador Dumisani Khumalo. How's the presidency reacting to that?
President sends his condolences to the family. I think he was a distinguished diplomat. He would have flown the South African flag very high, struggle stalwart, and we're losing so many of those, Desiree, and I think we treasure the contribution that he has made to South Africa.
Khusela Diko, thank you so much for committing to talk to us regularly, and we really can't wait. Eventually, we'll have our viewers join us in these conversations. But thank you so much.
Thank you,
for coming through. Khusela Diko is a spokesperson in the office of the presidency.